Good morning everyone and welcome to this full council meeting on Thursday the 9th of November. Welcome to members, welcome to our officers, welcome to Mr Andy Brown, our 151 officer who is joining us this morning. Our monitoring officer, Mr Matt Stokes, is available but not currently dialed into the meeting, and should we require his advice and help, the Chief Exec will contact him by phone and report back. And welcome to the press and members of the public in the public gallery. Please can I take declarations of interest to start with, please?
Chairman, on item 22, I declare an interest regarding the Tresco household waste. Could I just, as I will have to leave the room, could I make the point that it says in the report that Tresco Estate requested acceptance of waste, not actually the case. The residents of Tresco made the request. So that's just something that needs to be clarified, but I will be declaring interest and leaving the room.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dorrit-Smith. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Guy. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barclay. I didn't notice your light.
Chairman, sorry, as with the other off-islanders, I declare an interest in the off-island waste item 22.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 15 as I hold a current DD licence.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yes, I'd like to declare non-disclosable interest on items 11 and 22 as acquaintances of the applicant and the contractor.
Thank you. Going around the table, Councillor Williams.
Can I declare a non-disclosable interest in item 22 as I've got a wife who works in waste management?
Thank you. Councillor Legg.
A non-disclosable interest in item 22 as my uncle works in the waste on St Agnes.
Thank you.
Chairman?
And Councillor Nellis.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest in item 22. A non-disclosable simply as a resident of Tresco, but I shall stay in the meeting and discuss.
Yes, I mean, I do hope we'll be able to have contributions. Otherwise, there won't be many of us. There won't be many of us left. Right, can we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 10, please? To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Council on the 29th of September. Would anyone like to make any points, please? Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that they're a correct record.
Thank you. And seconded. Councillor Mumford. Seconded. Thank you. Could we have a vote on that, please? Oh, sorry, I didn't see Councillor Francis's light. Councillor Francis.
Chairman, I'd just like to point out that on page 3, paragraph 5, where it states that I said that if the community, it was actually of councillors, not community.
Thank you. Is everyone happy to accept the minutes with that amendment? I better go back to the proposer of acceptance. Are you happy with that amendment, Councillor Guy? Are you happy with that amendment, Councillor Mumford? Yes, with that amendment then, could we take a vote on accepting these minutes, please? All those in favour? Thank you, that appears to be unanimous. Moving on to agenda item 3, Chairman's announcements. So, as I sit in the chair for Councillor, on behalf of the Chairman who's away this morning, it is my pleasure to welcome several new members of staff. Nicola Stinson, the Senior Manager for Strategic Development, and also to welcome Michael Coates and Sandy Campbell, our new Environmental Health team. Since our last meeting, I have attended several meetings with mainland colleagues. The Local Enterprise Partnership, the Sponsor Board as a Deputy for Councillor Molson, the Leadership Board on my own behalf, and a workshop on the Shared Prosperity Fund. This fund is planned to replace European funding and may be helpful to the islands depending on the criteria used to access the funding. I have also had continued engagement with colleagues, lead members, and a recent meeting with the Chair of Scrutiny since we share the key financial responsibilities. I have also recently been invited to officially welcome a new British citizen at a recent citizenship ceremony, which was a very happy occasion. A couple of housekeeping points for this meeting. Please note that agenda item number 12, the auditor's letter, will now go to the December full council meeting. It is in draft form with Mr. Brown at the moment, but not ready for presentation. I shall also move item 22 further up the agenda to ensure the attendance of all off-island members who may occasionally, as you know, leave us before the end of a meeting for boating reasons. Therefore, that will follow the two finance items, so that will be taken after agenda item 13. And also agenda item 18, the update on the corporate estate, will also now come to the December full council. I'd lastly like to make just one other point, if I may. Next Sunday is Remembrance Sunday, and as we move to make decisions on behalf of our community, I would like to remember and reflect with grateful thanks those who fought to allow us the freedom to do that. Thank you very much. Can we now move on to agenda item 4? Questions under Standing Order 14, there are none. Agenda item 5, to consider reports from committees. Again, there are none on this occasion. Agenda item 6, to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. Again, there are none for this meeting. Moving on to agenda item 7. I intend to go round the table and take a verbal update from members. Lead members who have a Part 2 report according to their portfolio may obviously use this opportunity to give us a brief verbal update on that report, so that any other member who has a question can then ask that question of the lead member. You will have noted that there is no written report in my lead member finance role. As I have explained in a previous email to members, the time frame was difficult to comply with, given that the financial issues are moving on apace and we have a heavy financial report commitment in this committee, and therefore I thought it was wise to let Mr. Brown bring us fully up to date today, and then I will give a written report to the December meeting. I hope that is satisfactory. So if we could start perhaps with Councillor Sims, and if you have nothing significant to report, obviously that is also satisfactory. Councillor Dorian Smith, is there anything you would like to update us on? Councillor Barclay?
I have this week attended a meeting, my first meeting of the Cornwall Rural Community Council, and also observed a meeting of the Cornwall Partnership Trust, for which I'm the council's representative, and reports will be coming. I can assure members that these are two very active bodies, and indeed I've handed out a poster on computer education to the other off-islanders this morning for an event coming up on the 21st of November.
Thank you very much. You've been busy. Councillor Nellams.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've recently taken over the chairmanship of the Community Safety Partnership, and we've had two very good meetings, and there will be a full report going to the Health and Wellbeing Board in the January meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
I'll give an update in the scrutiny bit on agenda number 21.
Indeed. Councillor Guy. No update. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief update on the Smart Islands project, as you can see from my report in section 2. Recent developments would be Jim Wrigley as the new Community Interest Company General Manager has started in post. He's been, we will certainly be working well today, and I know we've been working with Nicola Stinson as well. So there's some good communications developments. That's very encouraging. Smart Energy Islands, the Hitachi project, is progressing well. They'll be holding events soon, which I shall be attending. And there will be a board meeting in about a week and a half's time. So that's all from the Smart Islands update. Happy to take any questions for clarification.
It appears that... Oh, sorry, Councillor Mumford.
Could I ask Councillor Smith if there's going to be another letter put round? There was one put round in June, which...
a newsletter?
A newsletter. Is there going to be another one soon?
My understanding from Hitachi is that there will be one produced in around January time.
Right. Could I just ask if, when you get those, if they could give us a pile to put in the shop, because Chief Executive gave me some and they've nearly all gone.
Certainly will be.
I think that's very encouraging. Thank you very much for that hospitality offer for the leaflets.
Just another very brief, in terms of St Martin's update, well, off islands, Duchy of Cornwall are coming round to do some visits to the community soon, which is very welcome, just in terms of the kind of wider island issues and their engagement with the community, which I think is encouraging.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
There's nothing in addition to my report, which is on page 137 of the document pack, except to say the Children's Trust met for the first time in its sort of current format yesterday morning, and there was good positive discussion from a range of local and mainland-based partners. And I'm meeting with the chair of the interim executive board next week regarding the ongoing process with the academy transition.
Thank you. Councillor Legg.
The non-emergency patient transport policy we have had a response from Kerno CCG, or well, the Health Watch has had a response. They have referred 2 areas to the scrutiny committee regarding urgent patient transport, and the other area regards escorts. So we will be looking into those in scrutiny.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Legg? No? Everybody happy? Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chairman. My report is included with my lead member update. Thank you, but just to report that next week I will be having a meeting with senior officers with regard to the publicity of details for the recycling that we now wish to get underway, and for green waste as well as general waste. So hopefully something will be forthcoming within the next fortnight that the community can now get involved with. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, that's very encouraging. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Chairman. On the 13th of October, I chaired the first meeting of the local plan working group. It was a good turnout. We agreed in that meeting the spatial strategy that will go into the document that will go out to consultation for the public. The main point from that is that councillors agreed that 105 new dwellings supported by open market housing would be the aim for the 5 years that the local plan will be active. I'd like to draw members' attention to the next local plan meeting on the 20th of November at 2 o'clock. So that's a Monday. It'd be great if we could get more members there and have another stimulating open discussion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to expand on 2 points in my report as lead member for adults. The first one is that the provision of accommodation on a permanent basis, which obviously will support the sustainability of and the recruitment of staff, is delayed, if that's the right word. It is still being examined, the suitability, because the Chime Moor has served or serves a purpose, but people who come permanently, I think you will all agree, prefer their own front door. they need their own accommodation, as it were. So the suitability of property is a serious consideration, considering the amount of money involved. So the whole idea is still being explored, and quite rightly so. The second point was that just before I went away, I had a call about the memory cafe. It wasn't so much as what was happening, because it's inevitable with the change around that's going on and the changes at Con Thomas, that there's a knock-on effect, as it were. And it was really rather that the way that it had been handled, they were given the choice of one, and they were rather upset that it hadn't been discussed. The point being that they were told that the memory cafe would have to be held in future, actually at Park House, in the room just as you go indoors, which of course rather defeats the whole object of having a memory cafe and giving elderly people the stimulus of a change of the environment. And it rather defeats the purpose to a degree of the cafe. As I say, it wasn't so much that it was inevitable and things had to change, but the way it was done. So I just felt that I should speak up for the voluntary sector, who we all appreciate, I know, the work they do, but I think that it could perhaps on this occasion have been handled slightly better. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Ashton Khan would like to come in there, please.
Okay, I'll start with Memory Cafe and then come on to accommodation for Park House carers. A Memory Cafe meeting, I held that meeting and I handled it really well. There are a couple of options. One was the second lounge at Park House, and the other is the Klondike meeting room down at the Wellbeing Centre, and we're exploring both of those options. Not all of the attendees at Memory Cafe are residents of Park House. It's quite the opposite, and actually I thought it would be quite nice if there could be some activities delivered to Park House, because that would enhance the well-being of residents at Park House and bring some life. Memory Cafe is really lively, lovely music, and I think people really enjoy it when they hear some of the workers at Memory Cafe playing music and it comes out into the garden. It's really nice, so I thought it was a good opportunity, and we suggested some amendments we could make to that lounge to make it suitable, but we'll look at Klondike. Obviously, we're trying to rationalise the council estate and make best use of all our premises. So Memory Cafe currently uses the dedicated space 4 hours a week, and it's just thinking about how we can use it better. And there's needs for children's social care to have certain kind of space, because as you know, they have to have 2 doors for client and worker safety. So we're just trying to work through it, and the process is in progress, actually. So it's not a done deal where I said you have to go here. It was a conversation about, can we find somewhere suitable? I think Memory Cafe are fantastic, and Adult Social Care fund their rent, £3,000 a year, to recognise the contribution they make to this community. And in terms of accommodation for carers, we've done a huge amount of work in terms of recruitment and retention, and actually, I just, at this moment in time, do not have significant accommodation needs right this second in time. And what I've got to balance is budget pressures, where if I take on more properties and I've got voids and I'm paying rent out of my service area, that's going to have an impact on our service for everybody else. It's finely balanced. So I just need to get to a position where I'm absolutely clear on the needs of our staff, and then we'll purchase accordingly. We can't afford to buy properties and not have people live in them, is essentially what I'm saying. But we're working through it. I'm working really closely with Nicola and looking at what's available and what's most sensible. But right now, I don't have pressing recruitment or accommodation needs. I'm never going to take my eye off the ball in terms of recruitment, but we've done a huge amount of work this year, and we should all be really proud of what we've done. From March, where we were talking about 350 hours of vacant care, we are right at this second in time, we're looking at 70 hours of vacant care. And that's an amazing achievement. We have a registered manager in place, we have cleaners in place. We've done a huge amount of work on recruitment. So I don't think we should be as concerned as we were in March, but we will always keep momentum behind it.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I mean, obviously, in certain, if we handle it correctly, borrowing capital at the moment, I understand, is quite cheap, but we've still got the revenue implications for an adult social care budget, which obviously has much pressure. And thank you very much for that clarification. And that also will help, hopefully, some of the comments that we've had either in the street or through social media about the lack of activity in this particular area, because we are, as Ashton said, working on this issue at the moment. Thank you. Councillor Watts. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mumford.
Could I just ask a question to Aisling, please? I believe that there's only one person in Chai Moor. How is that affecting your budget?
Well, currently there are two, but I just get really worried about talking about, individual living arrangements. It does have an impact. I've got a void in that home. I think, on reflection, I think as we move forward, I think it's really important that when we do think about staff accommodation, that we think about people's personal relationships, and actually working and living with people is quite a challenge, and people with different interests and different kind of ideas about what makes a fun evening, so I think I would be quite keen not to have to manage a HMO, house of multiple occupation, into the future. I think it adds a level of resource requirements on our service which is kind of unsustainable. I'd like to look at potentially smaller units, but we need to do it against not just the needs of our carers but the wider workforce, and that's exactly why it's fantastic working with Nicola, because that's what we're doing, taking a strategic approach. It makes a lot of sense to acquire maybe some assets, but I think we need to look at the people we've got from Cornwall Council coming over and just making sure, can we not only afford it but also afford the revenue costs of changeovers, cleaning linen. There's a lot more to it than simply promoting people in rooms.
I agree, because I think if you go back in time when Branksea Close was built for teachers, they do not want to live with each other and work with each other.
And it's true.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chairman. Two items, really. First one is that we've had a meeting of the Pilot Widows Fund Trust, of which I was appointed chairman, and we have a possible idea of spending some of the money that's accrued rather than leave it to build up and up and up. But more of that perhaps in the new year. Similarly, in the new year, members are aware that the next licensing meeting on the 23rd has been cancelled because of lack of information on two crucial substantive items. But I should have that information before Christmas, therefore it will be included in the next licensing meeting in the new year.
Thank you. Councillor Roger? No, fine. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 8, there are no urgent items. So we now move into part 1, reports requiring a decision. The report of the Senior Officer, Planning and Development Management. Agenda item 9, the dairy.
Thank you, Chair. It did have a PowerPoint, but unfortunately we've got problems this morning. But this is an application for, and just also to say that members did a site visit on Tuesday morning to have a look at the site and its context. So this is an application for alterations and extensions and a change of use of the existing cafe and associated residential accommodation above. As you'll note from the report, the application has been amended and has been carefully assessed in terms of the wider impacts. Whilst the scale of the proposal is greater than the current building, officers have weighed the issues and concluded that the proposal is on balance acceptable, subject to the conditions set out. Any questions?
Councillor Mumford.
I think the present building is not an attractive site. I think we could all agree on that, and it would benefit from a facelift. I consider the plans to be too overbearing and would not approve the balcony and terrace. For number one, I don't think it's necessary, because if anybody's staying there, they've only got to walk down to the front and they can sit and look over the harbour instead of looking into someone else's front room. I think I would like to see a reduction in the ridge or the pitch of the roof, and I'd like to recommend an amendment that the balcony is done away with and the roof lowered. So that would mean there wouldn't be a room in the top of the roof.
Well, could you have a look at 6.6 on page 22, where it's actually allegedly non-viable to move the pitch of roof down any further? Perhaps Ms Walton would like to clarify that for us.
Chairman, just very briefly, if you look at paragraph 5.9, you'll actually see that the pitch has already been reduced from 45 degrees down to 40 degrees.
I realise
and the
that.
difficulty is that any subsequent reduction will actually have an impact on the usable space. And of course, one of the benefits of this particular application is that it is providing quality visitor accommodation, which obviously the local plan does encourage.
As ever, a difficult balance. Councillor Mumford, would you like to come back before we move to Councillor Marcus?
I would still like to make a recommendation for an amendment to remove the room in the roof and bring the roof down, and not to have the terrace.
Right. Would you allow Councillor Marcus as planning lead to come in before we discuss moving forward with proposals for amendment? Is that satisfactory to you?
Yeah.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you very much. This application has caused a lot of conversation between members, and I'd like to thank the planning officer, Lisa, for organising the site visit the other day and taking us around there to show us the plans in context. I think that the plans improve vastly a building that adds nothing really to the local environment in terms of the gateway to Hewtown or what it actually looks like. I think there is some issue of bulk and of overlooking, but considering decisions that members have made previously, I don't think this is in the same context or the same ballpark in terms of overlooking. There is a gap, there's a road between the two properties, the three properties that have put in objections. And I think the applicants have worked with officers in order to try and compromise and make the plans more acceptable in terms of both the policy of the local plan and neighbours. So to that extent, and that it adds high quality accommodation for our tourist industry, to that extent I'd like to propose that we approve the recommendation as it stands.
Right, I would really have liked Mr. Stokes on the phone. Sorry, before we move forward and look for some advice if necessary, we'll speak to Mr. Thomas first perhaps. Can I ask Councillor Smith, did you want to say something?
Yes, in terms of this application, I mean, I think as the report says, and as a lot of members have said, this is a very difficult application. I think it is, as the report says, very finely balanced. I attended the site visit on Tuesday, which was very helpful to understand the context. I studied the design carefully. As Councillor Marcus says, this is certainly an improvement in terms of the actual appearance of the building. It's not of architectural merit. The reasons for the change of business are completely understandable, and I think that should be accepted. However, I do have concerns over the aspect of overlooking, particularly into Beach Haven, opposite the property, and the scale and the massing of the property is very large. And if we look carefully at the Arthur City Design Guide, page 24, page 25, these are serious issues. It also impacts on the skyline as you come over Carn Thomas and look towards the Garrison and Hewtown. Also slightly disappointing not to see any renewable energy or energy efficiency measures specified in the report, which I thought was disappointing. However, on balance, I find it very difficult to support an approval for the reasons I've just laid out. But that said, I would say that it is certainly a very difficult application.
Please write down.
Chairman, do you want me to come back on in terms of the overlooking issues? Because the report actually does make it clear, absolutely, as we know, overlooking and loss of privacy is a material planning consideration. But on balance, you'll see that what we say in the report, particularly at paragraph 5.21, is that on balance, in terms of the context of this particular application, and particularly the juxtaposition and spacing between buildings and the terraces, as well as things like the window arrangements, the fact that it is actually a public space, and that it is outward, the overlooking is front outward looking as opposed to rear outward looking, which of course was a major issue for us in terms of the Roanoke application. The balance on this one is that actually, all things being equal, it's actually acceptable. There will be some overlooking, but not to justify a planning refusal in this case. And the balance, of course, at looking at the overall planning application is that the benefits, the other benefits, including the improvement to the appearance of what is considered to be a very utilitarian and average building in a conservation area, and AONB, absolutely tips the balance in favour of recommending for approval, as well as the quality accommodation being provided.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
I agree. It's another example of Solonian Bulgarian brutalism, I think, that building. And the current plans would enhance it enormously. In terms of overlooking, I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever, because you have two big windows now which are better for looking into neighbouring properties, if you wish to, than the smaller window up top. So I would second Councillor Marcus's proposal. I think it's...
Excuse me. I think, as a matter of courtesy and protocol, we ought to ask Councillor Mumford if she's actually making a proposal, including an amendment. But would she please be aware of the comment about the restriction in roof height in 6.6? Sorry, Councillor Guy.
I was just going to second the proposal for approval.
Fine. Councillor Mumford, would you like to come back on that?
I would still like to make a recommendation for an amendment for the balcony to be removed and no terrace.
Now, my understanding from Mr Stokes at the last meeting was that you took the amendment first. But the Chief Executive, I think, would like to clarify that for us. In the absence of Mr Stokes, I'd like to ask him to give us some advice.
Just trying to get some clarity. Is Councillor Mumford making a proposal, and is that supported and seconded by anybody? Then there needs to be a vote. At the moment, it's a proposal by Councillor Mumford, but has not carried the support of members. We do, however, have a proposal to accept the recommendation of the report, which has been seconded by Councillor Sims.
From the Chair then, what I will do, as a courtesy to Councillor Mumford, because she actually put the proposal on the table first, I will ask if anyone would like to second Councillor Mumford's proposal. However, I would like a bit more clarity on it first, please. Mr Dryden.
Chairman, can I just provide some clarity in terms of what members are actually asking here? Because this would be such a significant amendment, because actually to change the slope of the roof would in effect mean that there wouldn't be any accommodation in the roof space, and that significant alteration would actually change significantly the application in front of you. So in effect what you're suggesting is actually a recommendation to refuse the current scheme, and so it's much cleaner then to give the applicant a chance to either resubmit a planning application if they so should wish to, with a very different scheme to actually incorporate those amendments, or indeed give them the opportunity to appeal actually against this particular decision.
I think that seems a reasonable point of view. Are you happy with that, Councillor Mumford?
I don't think I want to make a recommendation to refuse it. Can we not make a recommendation to amend?
Well, you can ask your colleagues if anyone would like to second your amendments, but I would have thought that we would have liked a bit more clarity on what those amendments actually were.
Chairman, I think the difficulty is, in terms of the asks, are such that this would not be a minor amendment. It would not be a minor revision. It would actually be a significant material alteration to the application before you. And I'd just like to remind members that we're here to discuss planning applications on the merits of the applications actually brought forward. Absolutely, if members feel that a scheme can be improved by minor alterations, that's absolutely perfectly acceptable. But to actually make a significant alteration by trying to reduce the roof again in terms of the roof slope, particularly where the report states that it would be very difficult to lower that roof space without compromising more of the accommodation actually in the roof space, I think would be very difficult.
Could I ask then for amendment to have the balcony removed?
Would you like to, bearing It is still a material plan. It is still a material amendment, Councillor Mumford. But I'm happy to ask Mr. Dryden to clarify again that point, if you like.
Chairman, my advice to members on this one is that unless members are looking at fairly minor alterations in terms of the materials or some of the detailing of the design, my view would actually be to determine this planning application as submitted, to give the opportunity for obviously members to actually debate this particular proposal, but also give, as I said to you before, the opportunity for the applicants to either appeal against the decision, should members wish to refuse, or indeed, if that is the case, come back with potentially a resubmitted planning application to address potentially some of the concerns that some members may have.
Chairman, I would agree with Mr. Dryden. I think we have to be brave as members and take binary decisions. We accept it or we reject it. We don't want to be in a situation like we were 3 months ago where things happen and just roll over and roll over. So I would counsel Councillor Mumford to try and come down on either side of the fence.
Right. I'd like to make a proposal for refusal.
Right, we now have 2 proposals on the table, but
we need reasons.
Would you like to give your planning reasons, your material planning reasons for refusal of this application, please?
I would like to say that I would like a refusal on this because of the balcony with the overlooking. If people were sitting on the balcony and overlooking into people's rooms, and I think it's a little overbearing.
Thank you. However, it seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if we already have a proposal on the table to approve the application. Therefore, we take that first, and should that fail, then we will proceed after that. Councillor Smith, I saw your light on. Would you like to quickly come in with anything else before we proceed to the proposal on the table?
No, I was just going to second the refusal proposal.
Fine. Councillor Legg.
Could I propose an amendment to include hooks for solar panels on the roof? Is that appropriate?
I think that could be a valuable consideration that we could leave to the jurisdiction of the planning department afterwards, if that's agreeable.
I would be happy with that.
Fine. Councillor Marcus, would you like to again reiterate your proposal for approval and seek a seconder, please?
I would propose the recommendation as written, that the application be approved subject to the conditions in Appendix 1.
Fine. Right. I understand, Councillor Sims, that you seconded that proposal. Fine.
Yes,
right. Can we take a vote on approval of this application, please? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 11. And against? 1, 2, 3. Therefore, the proposal is carried. Approved. The application is approved. Moving on to agenda item 10, 14 to 19, Higher Strand. Ms Walton.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application to replace the existing fibre cement tiles on these council homes on Higher Strand with a natural slate. The proposal is considered to be a positive change and is recommended for approval. Officers will point out that a sample of natural slate has been submitted and is considered to be acceptable and is therefore recommended that condition 3 be removed from the report as a recommendation.
Would anyone like to make any comments? Councillor Marcus.
I feel that this is not contentious at all, and I would propose a recommendation.
Councillor Legg.
Again, I would like to propose the suggestion of including hooks for solar panels that are installed at the same time as the slates, so that it would be possible to add solar panels later more easily, and I'll second the proposal for acceptance.
Thank you. Are you happy that the planning department note your request?
Chairman, just on that point, I think it would be unreasonable to actually put a specific condition on that particular application. But what we will look at is putting an informative on the decision notice to actually encourage PV panels actually on roofs. And I think that would be, in terms of the kind of guidance that we get from government, a much more acceptable alternative, if that's acceptable with members. But that would be my recommendation.
I think we're all aware that we now have a presumption that energy savings should always be considered in any planning application. Councillor Dorring-Smith.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I was just curious because this application and indeed the next one, there are no objections or comments as to why they've come to committee.
Because they're council properties.
Yeah.
Sorry?
This is a council. Yes, sorry, Chair.
Sorry, would you like to?
Sorry. Yeah, this is a council's own application to put the slates on. Yeah.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Dorring-Smith? Yes?
As to why the things were coming to committee, which were basically uncontentious and recommended for approval.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Sims.
I would like to propose the recommendation.
Councillor Sims has proposed the recommendation. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Councillor Dorring-Smith. And thank you, Councillor Mumford. I saw Councillor Dorring-Smith's light first. All those in favour of approval? That appears to be unanimous. The application is approved. Moving on to agenda item 11, the land adjacent to Adams Fish and Chips on page 35. Ms Walton.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to construct a unit of staff accommodation as a shared house for 3 people in connection with the fish and chip restaurant business on St Martin's. The applicant has indicated that he would also utilise the accommodation for other St Martin's businesses for staff accommodation purposes due to the seasonal nature of his own business. The proposal has been assessed and both the use and the impact are considered to be acceptable. It's a well-screened site. Subject to the conditions set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval. The reason this is on the agenda is not because it was contentious, it's because it was for a new dwelling.
Councillor Mumford.
Yes, I think this is a good plan. And I'm glad to see that he's thinking, because the fish and chip place is only open in the evenings, that the staff could work elsewhere as well on St Martin's, and I think it's a big asset. And I would like to propose approval.
Councillor Sims.
I second.
Sorry, Councillor Smith, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, just that I'd like to sort of contextualise it by saying I think this is it's critically important for the island to have more staff accommodation. I think this meets those needs very well. I think it's a good design, it's good siting, there's no local opposition. Therefore, I'd also like to support the proposal that's already been seconded. One minor point, I'd just like to check the wording of conditions 7 and 8, only because they're very slightly contradictory. 7 says that it can be leased to non-restaurant workers, which I would support, but the reasoning in condition 8 ties it to the restaurant. I just wonder whether it just needs a little bit of tidying up there, just so that they don't contradict each other.
Chairman, I think that's a valid point. We will actually, the issue I think is with condition 8, and we will actually review that particular wording of the condition.
Thank you.
So with that slight amendment to condition, the approval has been proposed and seconded. Could we take a vote on that? All those in favour of approval, please. That is again unanimous. That is passed. Thank you. Moving on, as item 12 no longer exists for this meeting, we're now moving on to agenda item 13, the medium-term financial plan 2018 to 19 to 2020-21, pages 45 to 52, and I'd like to ask our 151 officer to present the agenda item, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly before I go into the report, just in terms of the last agenda item, which will be deferred to the December committee in terms of the annual audit letter. That is the audit letter for the 2015-16 accounts. We have submitted everything to the external auditor, as the Chair mentioned earlier. I do have the draft letter. It just isn't in final form to be signed off. That letter is effectively the formal sign-off by the auditor and closure of the 15-16 accounts. So that will be coming to the December committee. As part of the outstanding items, I had to complete a going concern statement for the council, and that is what they're currently reviewing at the moment. But once that's finished, the letter will be presented and then formally approved by the next council. Just on that, though, I just wanted to mention that the 16-17 draft financial statements have been published and have been submitted to the auditor, and they are beginning their external audit of those statements. So the annual audit letter will formally sign off, because they have already been approved for 15-16 accounts, and the 16-17 audit is now being undertaken. A proposal that I've mentioned to the chair is to hold a training session on the 16-17 financial statements before you formally consider and approve those. And I'll come on to it later in terms of when we're looking at the budget timetable, but the proposal is to hold a training session early December that coincides with a budget workshop as well on the 18-19 budget. So we'll do both workshops on the same day. So in terms of the report that you've got in front of you today, the medium-term financial plan, it kind of kicks off the budget setting process for 2018-19. What I've tried to do in terms of best practice really is to set out the resources for the next 3 years for this council, and then an indicative estimate of future spending levels. So if I just cover off the future resources, which are outlined on page 46, that looks at the level of government grants, the level of council tax, the level of business rates that come in to fund all of the council services. So you can see the assumption there. Government grant is expected to flatline, which is again unusual, because across the country most councils are seeing significant reductions in government grant, but that's not the case here. Myself and the Chief Exec went up to speak to colleagues in the Department of Communities and Local Government to understand exactly the future changes and to get some assurances around funding, future funding for the Council of the Isles of Scilly, and we are making good progress with colleagues in DCLG around the future funding and securing the level of grant going forward, what we believe is required to fund services for the Council. So those are the assumptions on resources. I'd like to just bring your attention to the top of page 47 and the assumptions that go within that, particularly around council tax. So within the assumptions that you see are an increase in next financial year, 2018-19, of 4.99% in council tax. That's made up of 3% increase in respect for adult social care precept, which will be passported on to adult social care, as well as a 1.99% general rise. After that, there will be a 1.99% general rise from 1920 onwards, a small increase in the number of properties in what we call the tax base, and then it outlines a collection rate there as well. So those are the assumptions that are currently set within the medium-term financial plan. I just want to reiterate, and I will do again later, that this is planning purposes. You will formally set the council tax and the budget in February next year. So these are just proposals at the moment. Clearly, the actual final setting and approval will be subject to a future council meeting. Then moving on in terms of the estimated future spending levels, I've just extracted the budget that was approved at the council meeting on the 7th of March. And it shows, obviously, as was detailed then, that there is a structural deficit of around £390,000 that needs to be addressed. Within that, there are pressures around packages of a high-end SEN package, if you can call it that, that is currently being funded from reserves, but that reserve will be exhausted at the end of this financial year. We're also dealing with a shortfall, as I say, structural deficit, which is being funded from trading accounts as well in terms of the budget. So that needs to be addressed going forward. We also then have set out an estimate in terms of annual increases in the net spending level. For the basis of this is a 2.5% annual increase. And on page 48, the table sort of just above halfway on the page sets out what those increases on the net spending level going forward over the next 3 years. Compare that to the resources that we currently estimate are coming in. That gives us a gap at the moment in terms of that needs to be found to balance the budget of around 415,000 in the next financial year. Just to put, obviously again this is estimate and planning, so where we've estimated 2.5%, then there could be fluctuations in that in terms of any national negotiations around pay. Later on in the report you will see a report around waste and the pressures that are coming through there as well. So all those will need to be taken into account, and that's part of consideration in the timetable later. So there's a 415,000 estimated gap next financial year. Just wanted to then focus on bottom of page 48 and the future savings. Now, at the council meeting the 7th of March, where the budget and the council tax for 17-18 was set, a future list was also put forward. That's detailed at the bottom of page 48. And a recommendation in this report is to use that as the basis of future planning going forward. Now, that was set at a moment in time, so that is the information that was straight out of the budget report on the 7th of March. Clearly, time has moved on, things have changed, but what I'm saying in this report is that is the basis of future planning. Even with that, there will be an estimated shortfall against the gap of around 160,000. So clearly, that list needs to be reviewed and revised and updated, but there is still a gap that needs to be found in terms of balancing 2018-19 budget. So Appendix 1 on page 51 sets out a proposed budget timetable. So as today really kicks off formally the setting of the 2018-19 budget, there's a key announcement from the Chancellor on the 22nd of November, which may or may not affect local government finances. We'll await for that. Critically though, mid to late November is a senior officer review of effectively the estimate of future spending. So where I've put in an estimate of 2.5%, we need to start going through and refining whether that is accurate, what other pressures are there in the system. And if I go back then to the bottom of page 49, critical for that is the current financial year position and information. And it's just a reminder of the current position that we're in with our finances. In correspondence this week with the Chair of the Scrutiny and the Vice Chair as lead member for Finance, I've been quite candid in my words in saying that we are still in crisis management for budget monitoring. The priority has been the closure of the accounts. We have limited resources, and that's reflecting of a council this size. I believe that we've got the right number of staff in terms of the budget available to be able to deal with it, but we have to focus our priorities. We are still, therefore, as I say, in reactive and crisis management mode with regards to budget monitoring. Senior managers have not had detailed budget monitoring to be able to track their budgets and therefore track savings. We're addressing that now. Next week there's a meeting scheduled with senior managers to begin that process, but that's the first time they would have had that in this financial year. But the reason we're now bringing that forward is it's critical in terms of what the asks that I'm putting on senior managers to review that position, track their savings as best as possible and give commentary and analysis in terms of the position for the 17-18 to then inform the 18-19. As it sets out in the timetable, the proposal is then to bring that quarter 2 position that senior managers would have reviewed. If you cast your mind back to the last meeting where quarter 1 information was presented, it was heavy caveated. There was not analysis of the variance because of the reasons I've just set out. Managers hadn't had that information and hadn't been able to review that. We're correcting that for quarter 2. We've had to do a lot of work in terms of getting the information out of the system, ensuring the control accounts and the quality is there, but the work still needs to be undertaken in terms of analysing that quarter 2 information. The intention is to bring that to members to the next council meeting, and in terms of the informal workshop that we're going to be holding, That's why I'm asking senior managers to take that information and review it so that we can have a conversation around exactly the position ahead of setting the 18-19 budget. In terms of the General Fund Reserve, in terms of it was one of the issues raised by the external auditor, we have obviously taken corrective action in terms of establishing the General Fund Reserve back up at £1 million or just over £1 million. There will be a call this year to deal with the one-off deficit from previous years around business rates. The top of page 50 gives an estimate closing balance for March 2018. However, that is predicated on 2017-18 being a balanced budget. I'm happy to take any questions. So the recommendations are to note the medium-term financial position, to approve the timetable as set out in Appendix 1, and then also to approve the list of future savings as the basis of beginning to plan for the 2018-19 budget. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. I would say this is a very uncomfortable read, and there are, I'm sure, going to be other reports coming along shortly that will also be a very uncomfortable read. Mr. Brown has our full support, and each and every one of us understand the full depth of the Council's financial challenge. At 1.4, the key note is that the Council's current financial position is unsustainable. Before opening the discussion to the floor, can I just say, for clarity, I think it might be best if there was a proposal from the floor subject to your agreement to amend recommendation 3 and change the planned savings for future years to be approved to planned savings for future years to be noted as the basis of planning. I am well aware, following comments from colleagues, that at least half the members sitting around this table were not part of these original savings recommendation. I am also aware that following the depth of our financial challenge, my feeling is that we ought to be going wider and beyond this particular areas of savings. It may be there are other areas of savings that we haven't even looked at yet. And so, strangely, by softening this from approval to note, I think actually it gives us a wider playing field, if you like, to have a really good look at where we need to be. And Mr. Brown has clarified that for us, and I think it would be good if we reflected that in the recommendation. I'll leave that for your consideration, please. I'm not sure whose light was on first. Shall we go around the table and start with Mr. Nellens? Oh, sorry, Marion, sorry.
I read it with my mouth having more and more open because I do not recall being privy to any of those decisions. I could not have it. And then we're asked in the paragraph above it that recommendations this report proposes that these are now approved. Well, far from it. We need to cast our net a lot wider and yes, we note it, but maybe as an indication of the direction of travel, perhaps.
Thank you. They did come to a meeting, I would say, but with very little prior warning, obviously in response to the crisis management that Mr. Brown has noted. Councillor Nellens. No? Right. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. I'd certainly echo the comments around the amended recommendation. I was just totting up heads, and from Councillor Smith onwards that we're new, and so it's interesting to also note Councillor Barclay's comments about even some of the more experienced members not having that sort of input. I'd certainly urge, if we could, to confirm a date of the early December meeting as soon as possible. And I've got sort of dates hanging around in my diary, but this obviously has to be a priority. So if we could get that sorted very, very quickly, that would be very helpful. I'd echo the request to have a very comprehensive list brought to the early December meeting, really with no stone left unturned in that respect. And I'd also like to see very detailed analysis of how some of the costs have been calculated rather than having an end figure, just some breakdowns. We've got far more detail. And I just also wanted to raise where we are with the corporate strategy. Obviously, the corporate strategy and medium-term financial plan go hand in hand. Quite a bit of work was done by members in July, August time, but we're now in November, heading towards serious discussions, and I'm not really sure where the corporate strategy now sits in terms of its latest draft.
Would you like to comment on that, Teo?
Yes, fine. With regards to the corporate plan that's being refreshed, clearly members have had a number of workshops trying to identify the kind of top level, if you like, in terms of priorities. I'm currently working with the chairman to word that and refresh those areas and provide further detail for further workshops in the middle of when the chairman returns in December to finalise everything before the end of the year.
Yeah, it would be useful to have it ready when we have the peer challenge coming along in January. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chairman. I also welcome your suggested amendment that we reconsider these items that were agreed earlier in the year. For example, this particular building, I understand, is now back into offices and so on. I don't see where the £20,000 saving is coming from. So, clearly there are things there which need review. I welcome the report from our 151 officer, and I'm glad he is very pertinent in his comments. I would like to reiterate various parts of that. I welcome his timetable, but I am worried about the comment that when he meets with senior officers later this month, that they will start the process of looking at their budgets for this year. And that worries me enormously, Chairman. I know that there is difficulty, and I have sympathy for the situation where we haven't got a robust system in place yet for them to be able to easily monitor their budgets. But I'm sorry, we can't start the process at the end of this month. We have a lot of important decisions to make in December, and they need to be burning the midnight oil now and making sure that they know exactly where they are with their budgets, ready for the meeting with the 151 officer at the end of this month, and make their best effort to be sure that they are on top of their figures for this year. I know it's difficult, but it is absolutely, I can't find the word, but it's imperative that that is done, please, Chairman. Furthermore, I think it would be important, because the members around this table have got a lot of difficult decisions to make in December at our meeting, and I think it's important that the officers also come up with their refreshed ideas for cost savings and indeed for revenue opportunities, so that it's not just the members doing this. When we have our meeting in the first week of December, that we have some proposals from the officers that will help guide us, and that all of us around this table need to be thinking hard about how we can deal with this mess that we're in and try and come out of it. A lot of us, as Councillor Williams has said, are new members. We find ourselves in this situation, but we have to come out of it. And we have got to come up with some very innovative ways of trying to deal with this budget deficit that is also going to be palatable with our community. And we therefore have to have this on the table, having had discussed it early December, and then by our meeting on the 14th of December, I believe we need to have a raft of proposals which we debate and agree, so that we're ready for public consultation in the new year before we finally set the budget in February. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I would just say that I don't think there is a single officer. In fact, I know there is not a single officer that has not been, for some months, very, very cognizant of the depth of the challenge. The difficulty that they have had is in actually tabulating some of the budgets. However, that doesn't mean that they haven't been careful with what they've been spending. And we did agree different spending limits. and arrangements whereby the Chief Executive was monitoring with the officers any significant items of expenditure. And significant items of expenditure did come to full council if they were over a certain limit. I totally agree. We will all be very much welcome the new system, which is going live, I believe, in March 18, perhaps Mr Brown would confirm, whereby budget managers will then have the tools, far more tools, to actually monitor their spend. Although I totally agree with you, and I'm sure they have been doing, spending monitoring is really, really important. And as to the input from officers into the savings proposed, I'm sure they're working on that now. I'd like to articulate from the Chair that any contribution from any member of staff will be very warmly welcomed. In fact, I think we should actually perhaps have a suggestions box, and if people save us money, why shouldn't they perhaps have some sort of small, modest sum in recognition of that? Perhaps that's something we should work on. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
I don't really have an issue with changing approve to notify. However, it does sort of, particularly with reference to the Wesleyan Chapel disposal of it, does strike me as a little bit what we do tend to do quite a lot is we don't wish to approve it, we want to kick the can further down the road. We do seem to have a reluctance as members to grasp the savings we have to make, and it all happened too late last year. I thought was an issue, and I'm very worried about us going into the December meeting ill-equipped to deal with it, because if it goes into the new year it becomes increasingly problematic. That's my main issue really on that. And the other thing is that maybe I could get some, well, I mean not assurances, maybe that's pushing it a little bit, but in terms of business units being on budget for this year so far, do we have any sort of indication of that? Because I'm very, very worried about getting to March if we discover that one or more business units have gone 170,000 over, and we have actually significantly greater problem than we think we have now.
Yes, so I think the last two councillors' comments have echoed what I've hopefully been trying to say. It's a real concern. I'm extremely concerned. This, as I say, repeat, if this is budget monitoring in crisis, the simple answer is we don't know at this moment in time. So my staff are working on producing Q2 information for managers to then be able to interpret and understand that. At that point, we'll have an idea. I understand frustration from members, but the reality of the situation is that the focus has been to try to deal with the last 2 years in terms of getting the accounts closed and then getting the controls in place. That has come at a cost in terms of budget monitoring. I realise that puts you as members in a very difficult position when you have to make difficult decisions with absence of critical and financial information. So in terms of answering your question, do we know about business units in their position? At this present moment in time, we don't. But the Q2 position and meetings, as I say, will be held next week with senior managers. By the end of this month, we will have a firmer understanding of where we think we are in 17-18 to be able to inform 18-19. And then just on to echo Councillor Francis, that's my expectation that senior managers will work up savings options to then have that discussion with members to be able to then formulate plans for 18-19. It's got to be a joint decision. Ultimately, it's your decision about which direction proposals you accept, but you are relying on your officers to come up with those options for then you to have that discussion and debate in formally setting the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
First of all, I would like to thank Mr Brown personally for all the help that he's given me over the last few weeks with all sorts of questions I've been asking. I'm glad that the budget monitoring is going to start in earnest now. It's a pity that it hasn't been monitored before a bit better. And I welcome the training sessions, and I shall look forward to those. And I hope we can. I think it's going to be very difficult to find these savings, but we've got to find them somewhere. Otherwise, we're in the soup.
Councillor Parkley.
Thank you, Chairman. It does
Mr Brown.
I just wanted to clarify the list because it's obviously causing a bit of confusion. The list is purely a take from the previous paper that was set in the budget. So it was in the public domain back in the 7th of March 2017 when the 17-18 budget was set by the previous council. As explained, things have changed, but that is the basis of the list. So yes, the disposal of the Wesleyan Chapel is on there. Clearly, things have changed with the offices now being occupied. But as I say, that forms the basis of a review of savings and options. I am not saying that these, I endorse what the Chair is saying in terms of noting those as the basis of beginning to plan for the 18-19, but they are not concreted in terms of those are the savings that we're going to deliver because clearly time has changed. What I was doing was just copying and pasting what was in the report at that time in the public domain that was used to set the 17-18 as a basis to begin to close that gap. Clearly, officers will still need to come with different proposals and increase the amount of proposals to cover the gap, and then there'll be a discussion with members in terms of formulating that final list of savings ahead of setting the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Francis, yeah. Can you make it fairly brief? Sorry, but I'm aware that we've got quite a heavy agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to come back on your comments actually earlier, just to reiterate that I was not in any way attacking our senior managers over this. I was just making it clear that this is what needs to be done. So please don't think that that was my agenda. But it is obviously absolutely clear that we cannot set a budget for next year unless we know where we are when we start.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to...
Thank you for that. That was useful.
Thank you.
Councillor Mumford. Quickly.
I'd like to propose the recommendation 1, recommendation 2, recommendation 3 with the word approved taken out and noted to be put in.
Thank you very much. Is there a second of that, please? Councillor Guy. Sorry, Councillor Marcus, did you wish to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to take issue with... just wanted to reiterate the fact that budget monitoring won't happen. Ask Andy Brown a question. Budget monitoring, you say here March 2018. When are we actually going to get up-to-date budget monitoring? I imagine it's going to be after that sometime. So Councillor Mumford's comment of budget monitoring starting now is not entirely correct. I take that. And also, the decisions that we make, I don't think are going to be palatable to the community. I think there are going to be some really tough decisions. I think we are deluding ourselves if that is the case, really.
I think we all do realise that. I certainly do. Councillor Mumford does as Chair of Scrutiny. Yeah. So we now have... Sorry, Andy Brown, Andy, did you...
Yeah,
Mr. Brown, did you want
to
to
clarify that in terms of budget monitoring. So for 17-18, as I said, the staff have been working on taking the information out as at the end of September, quality assuring that in terms of the controls, clearing suspense accounts. So reports to senior managers are due out at the end of this week, and meetings have been scheduled with my staff to begin budget monitoring for the first time in 17-18 next week. So budget monitoring is beginning. I'm still caveat it around the time it takes to get the information out and the quality, but it's a step in the right direction from
but that's for quarter 2 rather than up to date.
Indeed, yes. It's
so
quarter
there
2
are other
information.
pressures that have happened. I can think of the academisation issue and things like that.
There'll be things that have happened and moved in terms of October, November, and also we'll be using that position to forecast to the end of the year and in terms of what could happen in the latter half of the year as well.
Thank you. Can we proceed? Because we do have a proposal on the table with a suggestion to change the word approved to note in number 3.
I'll second, unless somebody has already.
You've seconded it. Thank you. Can we have a vote, please? That appears to be unanimous. Is anyone against? No? Fine. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Mr. Brown, for all your help and support, both to Councillor Mumford and myself, and thank you for this morning's explanation. Can we now take agenda item 22, the Off-Island Waste Management Plan, on page 121? Mr. Dryden. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, members. As I won't repeat the contents of the report because I'm sure you've all read it. In summary, it's a report outlining off-island waste management and some of the key pressures which are coming up at the moment. There are 3 areas that we've looked at in the report. That includes the request from Tresco Estate that we start to...
Apologies, Helen, but just for point of clarification, Robert Dorian-Smith made at the very beginning of the meeting that it was a request from Tresco residents, not Tresco Estate.
Okay, sorry. From Tresco residents, that the Tresco resident waste arising from Tresco residents would be accepted by the Council of the Isles of Scilly. Additional to that, there is on review of off-island waste management as a whole, we've had a look at the costs of waste management and have highlighted that the waste management services on St Martin's are an elevated cost in comparison to the other off-islands. And it's also been noted through conversations with members and the community that there is a perception that there is an issue around commercial waste on the off-islands and whether or not that is being properly accounted for. So we've addressed that in here and made a recommendation that we just ensure that the commercial waste management monitoring is as tight as it possibly can be to reassure everybody that the costs there aren't being incurred by the council. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the report. So this obviously potentially has implications for St Martin's. I'd like to just say on the public record, because I've been approached by the contractor and by a lot of residents on St Martin's that they're concerned about the implications of this. I think I would reiterate that we are trying to strike a balance of saving costs and maintaining good services. I've talked this through with Craig Dryden an awful lot yesterday and had correspondence with Helen Pearce as well. I would like to propose a slight change to the recommendation to read that we should agree to accept Tresco residential waste from council tax paying properties and to review the costs and charges after 6 months after implementation. The reason for that being that the costs in the estimates in Table 2 are simply that, estimates. We don't know what the figures will be, therefore it will probably be prudent to review after 6 months. Secondly, I'd like to have a point to investigate and understand the reasons for the high cost of the St Martin's waste contract. Thirdly, to re-specify all of the off-island waste contracts to incorporate the new recycling system and provide best value for money. And I'd reference point 1.3 in the report that in fact all the services will be reviewed shortly anyway because of the changes at Morewell. Lastly, I would keep obviously the tighter monitoring and application of commercial waste charges. So those are my proposals for the change in the recommendation, which I hope is acceptable to all. And to reiterate that I will certainly work to protect St Martin's waste services in as good a form as we can.
We would expect nothing less, Councillor Smith. Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll second Jonathan's proposal. Just the one question, the contract for shipping the off-island waste from off-islands to St Mary's, when will that be up for renewal, please?
It's on the list. Like anything, I think you'll probably all be aware that our procurement pipeline is pretty full and the resource is incredibly pressured and there's lots of other priorities, let's say. So it will happen in due course. It's just sort of on the list. I wouldn't want to give a time for that happening because I honestly don't know exactly when that will be, but it's certainly on the list.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. There's obviously a lot more work to be done. Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chair. I would just also like to support Jonathan Smith in his efforts with this item. I do, however, have a question, and that is why we need tighter monitoring and application of commercial waste charges. There should, to my mind, have been tight monitoring from the start.
As I said when I was presenting the report earlier, it's in response to the anecdotal concerns which have been raised by both members and the community. In terms of the operational systems that are in place, I don't believe that it is a big issue. I don't believe that there is the data to suggest that there is. However, in order to reassure the community, reassure members and residents that we aren't subsidising businesses, it was really just to say we do prioritise this, and we will make sure that whatever we have been doing is adequate.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, could you make it brief, because I am aware of the agenda.
Yeah, of course. Two short questions. One is, what is the timetable on the implementation of accepting Tresco residential waste? And secondly, the timetable on re-specification of all off-island contracts, please.
My view would be that for the off-island contracts, that we'd be looking to get those re-tendered for the next financial year, so for the beginning of April. Not all the contracts are actually necessarily have to be recontracted soon, just for the various values of them. However, there's no reason that we can't look at that, which is obviously in the report and as you've put in your proposal. In terms of the Tresco waste, it could be in year, it might be the beginning of the financial year. I think at this stage we're just entering those initial discussions, and we were looking for approval from members to proceed with that. So in terms of when that's turned on, I'm not sure. I've included in the report what I think the in-year budget impact would be should it start this financial year, and definitely what I consider it would likely to be for next year. But again, until we've got a bit further along, I'm not sure what the answer is. Sorry.
Could I just ask then that we aim to start taking Tresco residential waste by the beginning of April the next financial year?
Can I just clarify, do you mean that you wouldn't want to see it happening sooner, or that you would want to ensure that was the latest that it happened? Okay.
Yeah, I think we've got to be sure that compliance overrides budget considerations, unfortunately. So,
Councillor Sims.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I'm really pleased that Tresco is finally being brought into the fold, because it's been a really, really long time coming, and the people on Tresco are quite reasonably, I was going to use the different word than hacked off because of the situation. And one other little point is the bottom of, is it table one? Table one, we've got Cosford on St Mary's 61, and then it goes up. Now, it makes it a lot more stark if there's a percentage underneath it. So St Mary's would be 100, Briar and St Agnes are about roughly 600, and St Martin's is 987% more. That makes it a little bit more stark when people look at it, and sometimes it's better to have relative numbers than absolutes, sometimes the other way around.
Yeah, I think we do agree there's an anomaly, and it's been agreed we're going to try and find out why that anomaly is actually why it is.
I agree there's an anomaly. What I was talking about is just, if you report it, sometimes relative values are
I think we've agreed that already. Sorry to cut you short. Councillor Roger.
Yeah, refer to page 125 in the top paragraph concerning St Mary's and the grey sack collection. Whilst I agree that this proves successful and effective and seems to work well, I would raise perhaps a question that the sort of outside grey sack collection of boxes, folded, crushed, whole, is perhaps not so successful and effective, and perhaps there's not a level playing field in that area, and it might be an area to look at in more detail.
I take that on board. I do think that the dry recycling collection should go some way to mitigating against that, because those boxes will be included then in recycling collection instead. So hopefully, without having to do too much difference.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I just say we seem to be straying into operational issues. I think it's recognised we've got a problem. We've got lots of anomalies we have to address. And I am concerned that we should perhaps move to the proposal that's been on the table and seconded, unless anyone has any material differences to that. I think we have to accept a lot of work is going to go on behind the scenes, and this is just a start point. So we have a proposal amended by Councillor Smith, which is now seconded by Councillor Guy. Can we take a vote on that, please? Thank you all for your contributions. That is unanimously approved. Right. We'll just wait for Councillor Dorrans. Thank you very much. Yeah. We'll wait for Councillor Dorrans Smith to come back, and we're now moving on to agenda item 14. Page 53. I believe the Chief Exec is going to take this.
Thank you, Chairman. The report deals with the fees and charges for the registration service for 2018. The paper has set out the basis on which these fees and charges have been arrived at. There are three key elements. First element is around the delivery of the service plan that members agreed earlier this year, or the prior council agreed earlier this year. We have conducted a cost analysis of the cost of providing the services, and we have conducted a benchmarking exercise with 3 other local authorities in terms of their fees and charges for registration services. So the proposals are in the appendix for members to consider. It is worth noting that quite a large number of fees and charges are set nationally through the General Registration Office, and so therefore the only fees and charges that members set are those where we have the freedom and flexibility of set those charges. The reason for bringing these fees and charges to you now is that they should come into effect in line with the General Registration Office, and we need to start publicising new fees and charges for reservations being made already. Any questions?
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Chairman. This paper and the next 2 papers kind of confused me, to be honest. I am wary of, I just don't feel there's enough background to these fees and charges and the impact of these fees and charges on the budgets, the revenue budgets of these areas is not explained at all in these papers. All of these areas are vitally important for the islands as a whole, especially registration. That brings in tens of thousands of, I would have thought, tens of thousands of pounds and lots of people to the island. It's just, given that we are asked to save so much money in the next few years, and that these budgets, this paper will increase or decrease the effects of that revenue over the next few years, it seems unfortunate that there is no impact on how the revenues will be affected by these increases. There's no number here on what the numbers were for previous ceremonies, how it's been impacted, what the previous rises were, what the trends are in the country. We need as councillors to be sure that the systems work, and we need to be sure that we've got empirical evidence that we know that price rises will bring more revenue into the organisation. If we were running a business and we were to increase prices, we would want to know a strategy behind those increases. However, I am aware that the business needs to continue and that uncertainty doesn't help the business in any way. So I am proposing the recommendation, that we approve the recommendation, but with the caveat that, with reservations, and I'm hoping the upcoming budget sessions will rectify this lack of it feels like a lack of information on how the impacts of these rises and these changes, basically. So
Can I briefly respond to that? In terms of the kind of business plan, if you like, for the registration services, that's the plan that was approved by members back in March, April at committee stage at those days. It's on that basis on which the service is now being redeveloped and refreshed, if you like, and it's aiming to increase the number of weddings. I'm very pleased, and members will see a full performance report that for this year we have reached the target that was set in terms of weddings, and we anticipate to perform financially where we thought we were. In terms of setting these fees and charges, we did do a benchmarking exercise with 3 other local authorities to assure that our fees and charges are in line, if not slightly higher, than some of the other local authorities. We are in the middle at the moment, so there is still some scope to increase fees and charges further where we have the flexibility to do so. However, I think it's prudent to move them into the medium, if you like, the medium, so to test next year what the impact will be in terms of numbers going forward. Hence, there are some fees and charges which will see a significant increase, because those were the fees and charges where we were significantly cheaper than other local authorities in this area.
Thank you very much for that. I don't disagree with anything you've said, but I just need to know, I need to see, we've been told by auditors and by officers, by yourself, that we need to be more financially aware and astute about the organisation. Without that evidence shown to us, it mentions here that you've benchmarked, but I don't know, I can't see that. So where's the evidence in that? So it's just, I think, next time this happens and with budget setting, we need to be shown so we can then take assurance that you have done the work properly. So I just wanted to make that point, really. So I don't disagree with anything, and that strategy and that sounds correct. We don't want to overprice ourselves so people don't come here. But we just need to make sure that we as councillors, as the board, if you like, need to make sure that that is happening. So again, I would approve the recommendation.
Councillor Sims.
I'll second the recommendation.
Thank you.
In terms of what Dan just said, if each of these had a full explanation with them, we'd have 600 bits of paper here. But so maybe a compromise on that is if a couple of, in future, if 2 or 3 of them, the charges could have half a page of A4 explaining what those particular ones were, then perhaps it would contextualise the whole thing. Because some of these rises are quite high, there's 140% there. I mean, I just assumed it was on the basis it was a wedding, so you can quadruple the price. But, so I mean, I'm happy to, like I said, I'm happy to second them, but I do, you know, you've got such a lot of stuff there, you can't get a full explanation, because frankly, we wouldn't be able to read it all and absorb it. So I think a couple of them highlighted would perhaps have a little bit more utility, though I do completely agree with you in every other sense.
Right, can we take a vote then, please, on the recommendation as printed? All those in favour? Fine, that's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 15.
Thank you, Chairman. This is relatively simple. Fees and charges that can be changed by members are being under consideration. Last year, the Council did or the Licensing Committee did a full review of the cost of particularly the boat licenses and made some significant changes. Therefore, for this year, we propose to increase fees and charges by the RPI index for September Reason that this paper is coming to members now is that these fees and charges need to be published as a matter of urgency. So no changes in terms of the method, simple RPI increase. It is anticipated, however, that there will be changes to some of the licensing arrangements, and we are in discussion with partners and the MCA on future arrangements which will come to members for consideration.
Could I just ask the Chief Executive to clarify 3.3 on page 61, that the fees for fixed site trading are subject to the separate report which will be adjusted accordingly. I think we probably need a bit more discussion, not for this morning, about the general direction of travel, because I see on page 63 future fees to be determined once additional sites become available. This is quite a contentious issue that I think does need to be properly aired. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that some businesses do give us an awful lot in business rates. I know we don't, depending on the formulae, get all of it back, but nevertheless they have a considerable outlay in business rates. It would be unfair, I think, if we allowed a fixed trader selling the same or a similar project to set up business within a reasonable space. I think we just need to air this more fully, but now is not the time.
In terms of clarity, that's exactly, I think, what it does. The fixed trading sites, the fees were agreed by members in the previous council. They were fixed for a 3-year period, and therefore they cannot be changed. We do not have any further fixed site trading sites, so therefore there is no fee that can be agreed to.
No, indeed, but all I'm just saying is that I hope before we do approve any more fixed trading sites, it does come back to committee, full council or wherever for full discussion and airing, because it is, as I say, a controversial area. Councillor Sims.
I'd like to propose the recommendations.
Right, proposal of the recommendations. And Councillor Legg is seconding it. Can we have a vote, please? And is anyone against? Councillor Gutt, would you like your abstention recorded, Councillor Guy?
Also, Chairman, may I record an abstention there, because I just realised it involves boat licence charges.
Yes, indeed.
I should have declared it earlier.
Fine. Right. Thank you for that, and thank you for that. Agenda item 16, pages 65, fees and charges for active silly.
Thank you, Chairman. I take the paper as read. What we've tried to do with the current fees and charges is 2 things. One is to simplify the number of fees and charges that were previously applied to the active silly activities. And also try to identify ways how we can drive up numbers. So hence, you will find in the fees and charges some changes and some discounts in terms of longer-term commitments, if you like, to the service, and also some discounts for families using the services. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I welcome the work to increase the revenue that the new manager is actually undertaking at the moment. Councillor Marcus, did you have your light, or have you changed your mind? No? No? Councillor Mumford, I think your light was on first, just marginally.
Yes, I see that you put in a family rate and concessions for the young. There's no concessions for the elderly. There used to be a concession for the over 60s. I just wondered whether there could be a concession for the over 70s.
I thought there was when I read it,
there
I
is
thought
no
there
concession.
They've maintained the price, have they not? Which is £4.50, for example, for swimming rather than £6.
The rate, concessionary rate that has been there previously was removed by members at the last year fees and charges setting. But clearly there are concessionary rates for those on means-tested benefits and those that are registered disabled, blue badge holders.
I just feel that perhaps for the rehabilitation side of it, for people, that they really need to go 3 times a week. Twice a week is not enough, because they can only go twice a week, because that's the only time there is somebody there. They have to be supervised. And so they can only go twice a week. And I just feel that the elderly should have a concession as well as the children. Maybe I should go into discussions with Susie Taylor.
Could we approve the recommendation and suggest that further work be done on your suggestion? Because if it twins with health prevention, then I think that would be quite a good idea, and we could perhaps bring it back to the next committee meeting. Would that be agreeable?
Yep.
Right. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have discomfort with the fact that half an hour ago we were talking about trying to make massive savings on the budget, and here we are giving away more concessions. I take the Chief Exec's point that we're tidying up some of the figures. I've got no problem with 20p here and there, but it's the general concept, the general principle. I don't necessarily think that leisure services fit the model of supply and demand where cutting costs necessarily boosts footfall. And again, there's no evidence in this report to suggest that. I think we need to be looking at smarter ways of doing that, quality of service, timing of services and things like that. So although I will go with the recommendations, it just doesn't seem right that we've got to find huge savings, but we are giving more concessions away overall.
I think it comes down to monitoring, doesn't it? I've spoken to Susie Taylor. She is adamant that she thinks she can increase the footfall and that some of this work will increase the footfall. If we monitor it and it doesn't work, then I would imagine we could come back and amend it.
Yeah, I think that's right. What we have done over the last year is to get much more detailed information and data on the users and, most importantly, non-users. And so we're trying to develop a model that exactly raises income or increases the income by higher numbers. And that's what the model is trying to do. I accept that it may not be right yet, and I accept there might be some tweaks that need to be put forward, but really I think it's important as a local authority and as a service provider that we do push numbers going up as much as possible.
It would just be really helpful if the data you're talking about was in this report. So we've got some evidence to accept that. Again, it's taken it at face value. I would like to see that there is evidence to support those claims.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Councillor Williams there. And that also previously members agreed that a full option analysis would be brought to to Council in September 2017, and that obviously hasn't happened. We just, and going back half an hour as well, part of the budget savings that members approved previously for next year was a £50,000 saving in active CILI. There's no relation in this report to how that would affect that savings. So just more, again, I'm repeating myself, but more information, please.
Fine, noted. Councillor Timms.
With reference to Joel's point, I think this depends on the price elasticity of exercise, really. You can reduce revenue costs and get substantial increase in income, and yet sometimes it doesn't work, though.
Monitoring key.
So, pardon?
If we monitor, obviously, that will become apparent, hopefully, before too long.
Yes, it might have been useful if Susie would have been here, perhaps, to elucidate, talk about this a little bit. But I would essentially, with similar reservations that other members have, propose that we accept the recommendation.
Right. And proposed by Councillor Sims and seconded by Councillor Mumford. Can we take a vote, please? All those in favour? Councillor Sims, are you raising your hand? Yeah. Anyone against? I think that was unanimous. Thank you. Can we move on to item number 17, pay policy statement, which is page number 71, and the Chief Executive again will present this.
Thank you, Chairman. I take the paper as read. This pay policy statement was due to come earlier to members. Apologies for that. It has updated the latest information with regards to the joint negotiations and some minor amendments which are in part 2 of the Green Book have been made to provide some further clarification on the pay policy. The recommendations is that members adopt the pay policy.
Any comments, colleagues? Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask the reason why the document was ready in February, why it's taken so long to get to Council, and also to note that the ratio of senior pay to medium pay has risen, and sort of ask for an explanation around that and how that sits with other organisations, please.
Thank you. Well, the ratio calculation, of course, depends on the number of people that are working for the local authority and where those people sit. In terms of, and that's slightly different every year. In terms of the figure where we sit extremely well. If you compare that, Bristol, for instance, sits at 8.34, and Gloucester sits just under 10%. So in terms of good benchmark, if you like, we're sitting very positive. The more equitable local authorities hover around 5 to 6. I don't know what Cornwall is.
Any other Councillor Williams?
Chairman, I was confused by some aspects of the report, so I just took the liberty to ask some staff members who manage staff over evenings and weekends whether they were totally au fait with it, and they reported in the negative on that. So I think some work needs to be done with staff who are managing some of the people who are affected by this, so they're totally clear whether their staff fit in the enhanced rates or they don't, because it's clear at the moment, certainly from one branch of a service, which I can perhaps talk about outside the meeting. I don't want to go into part 3 about whose staff is whose, but there's certainly confusion within staff about enhancements at the moment, which I think needs to be examined.
I think it's best that we just ask the Chief Executive to note that and act on it.
Yeah.
On that basis, is someone happy to propose that? Yeah. Fine. So.
I'll second it then.
Thank you. So the recommendation to adopt the pay policy statement 2017 to 18 has been proposed by Councillor Sims and seconded by Councillor Marcus. Can we have a vote, please? That is unanimous. Thank you. We're now moving to item number 19, a review of the Members' Allowances Scheme on page 97. And before we start, if I could just say there is going to be a workshop at, I believe, 1:45. That clock is rather confusing. It is currently 11:20. Will you confirm the time, Andy? Is it 1:45?
Yeah, I believe it is 1:45. Yeah, the
Thank you. In this chamber. Thank you. Mr. Thomas.
I'll carry on. Sorry. I'll take the report as read, and I won't spoil the magic. Obviously, we've got a workshop coming up later. You can arrange to meet Dr. Hall if you let me know. I can slot you in today. Some of you are already slotted in. You see Dr. Hall in the stands here. Yeah, and the recommendations are as read. If you've got any questions, please let me know.
Councillor Sims.
Well, I would just like to propose this. For a start, if we turn it down, it would leave Dr. Hall's visit, make it slightly problematic, wouldn't it? You just have to go early, perhaps, but I would propose the recommendations.
Thank you. I mean, it's important to note that this is the start of a process, and we will be ably assisted by Mr. Hall when he will get the resources that he needs as appropriate, I'm sure.
Chairman, if I just make the point, recommendation 3, it's just in terms of the wording, a typo, if you like, that pending the outcome of the review, the scheme be amended to include the scrutiny committee with effect from annual council this year. That's already happened this year, obviously. The word pending, he took to mean by he, is our monitoring officer, is with effect from this decision that the scrutiny committee be included forthwith.
Thank you. Is everybody happy with that?
As opposed to pending the outcome of this review that's about to happen.
Right. You were happy to accept, propose the recommendation? Yes.
I sort of think we have to really just get it out of the way and move on, really.
Fine.
Yeah, I'll second that.
And Mr. Councillor Marcus seconded. Can we have a vote, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. You'll be happy to know, Dr. Hall, that your efforts are continuing, please. Item number 20, health and wellbeing terms of reference, that came as a late paper to Council yesterday. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
I think I'm going to present this report, Chairman.
Oh, good. Thank you very much indeed.
I'll try and keep it as short as possible. The paper's been presented because obviously the situation outlined in 1.10 is undesirable and unsustainable, so we need to look at the arrangements for making sure meetings are quorate. I think the biggest frustration from my point of view dates back to the 1972 legislation, where we can have a video conference where someone can be seen and can be heard, but they can't be classed as present. And I think this sort of archaic nature of that is doing us no favours. I'd like to make two slight adjustments to the proposed recommendation, if possible. I think with the work that's going on with the STP shaping our future at the moment, it's probably best not to move into recommendation 1 immediately. I think there's still quite a bit of work around NHS and health provision, which would probably be preferable to have as many health partners at the table as possible. And I think, bearing in mind other conversations with the author of the report, who's put a very detailed proposals together, I'd like to amend the figure from 8 in recommendation 2 to 6, which I think again allows us to remain quorate, but also for business to be conducted efficiently as possible.
Can I ask, so how many people are actually on the board then? I'm slightly confused about who's...
Again, I think that's one of the confusions. We've got people who want to join the board who aren't necessarily members. We're on next week we've got a meeting where people are looking to participate from the mainland who aren't necessarily members. So the actual membership is sort of set out in here, but there's still uncertainty about who exactly constitutes a member at times. And that's also down to some deputisation, delegation of responsibilities for people who participate at meetings.
So basically we are just recommending that the quoracy changes to 6. That's the only recommendation. Losing recommendation 1.
I would suggest we do. That will allow meetings to be quorate. But I think the other point I just wanted to make is there's no indication that any of the decisions taken at meetings which weren't quorate will ever come back to impact on any work the Council or the Health and Wellbeing Board is doing.
Councillor Barclay, would you like to, you have previously discussed a concern of yours concerning the health representation on this board. Would you like to articulate your concern again? It seems that 1.12, which Councillor Williams was also discussing, just so that we're clear, there is a large body of work, as again Councillor Williams has alluded to, with the Sustainable Transformation Plan and shaping our future. And it seems that we may be losing valuable input.
No, I mean, all I would say is that I think all our health partners should be represented.
Yes. I mean, I think if we only have one person, such as I would imagine Mr. Confew, who sits on the Cornwall board, and if Mr. Confew, for whatever reason, fog or the telephone link breaking down wasn't with us, then we would have a very wide area not properly represented. Would you like to comment on that as Chair, Councillor Williams?
Well, I think that's part of a proposal to take recommendation 1 out of this paper.
So you would like it, sorry, just to clarify then, you'd like it completely removed?
I would, yes.
I understand. Sorry for that. My misunderstanding. Fine. Okay.
So I'd like to make a proposal that we remove recommendation 1 and that recommendation to get 2 gets changed to 6 members.
Would you, would you like to add perhaps that the membership of the board be subject to review, to leave ourselves open?
It can be. I think with all these things, we're always open to review as new partners potentially come to the table.
No, fair enough. Let's just take, let's leave it at taking recommendation 2 then, that the quorum for the board be set at 6 and that the membership of the board remain as a status quo for the moment. Is that correct? Yes. Fine.
I'm happy to second it, and in a way it's just as well that the Health and Wellbeing Board doesn't have to make this decision, because I fear it would be impossible.
Right. Proposed by Councillor Sims and seconded by... Oh, sorry, proposed by Councillor Marcus and seconded by Councillor Sims. Right, would you please, may I have a vote? Thank you again. That is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 21, Scrutiny Committee update.
Can I take this one, please, Mr. Chairman?
Indeed, but that would be helpful.
I'll take the report as read. I would just like to update you on what's going on with the urgent care and emergency. It has been referred to us, and we are hoping to bring it to our scrutiny meeting on the 23rd of November. If NHS Kernow can't attend, we want them to attend, not to do it by video link. We want them to attend. A meeting will be called as soon as possible, but we're hoping it will happen on the 23rd. There's emails flying all over the place at the moment, so it may be resolved before then.
Thank you.
Other than that, I'm prepared to take any questions. Oh, I'd just like to say that my peer mentor is coming on the 20th of November.
Just like to ask one question. 118 about was that airport parking fees? Is there any update on that? Because that's going to likely to be quite a talked about issue, I would have thought.
What do we look at 118?
118.
The right notification. I've done some publicity that we will be charging for parking at the airport.
When?
Chairman, a very good question. What? As soon as we can. I'm certainly hoping by the end of this calendar year, certainly by the beginning of next year.
Can I just make a quick point from the chair that at the base of page 108, it actually lists 3 informal meetings. I think we should make it understood for the public record that the way the Scrutiny Committee operate, these informal meetings are very necessary. It's a body of work that is delegated, as I understand it, Chairman, to a small group of members that can do an in-depth study, and that is more appropriate to an informal setting, and then any decision making will always come back to full scrutiny and then referred to full council as and when necessary. I just thought we'd have that as a clarification.
Yes, that's correct. I'd
Ashley.
also like to thank all my committee because they're working very hard.
Thank you.
Oh, and Bob, my right-hand man.
Indeed. Indeed. Aisling Khan.
I'm sure you're aware, but we have the LGA coming to the islands at the end of November to do a test of assurance for people services. So they're going to be doing a deep dive into children's services and adult services, but also the Health and Wellbeing Board and also the scrutiny function. So they'll definitely be wanting to meet with you, Councillor Mumford, and the officer in charge. I will coordinate that, and I've got arranged a meeting with the officer to start coordinating documents. But I think we want to think hard about, where's the scrutiny happening of children and adult services in this work plan? Because you're letting us off lightly currently, which I'm glad of.
I mean, we're all working in a new system, and I think we all welcome help and support and constructive criticism and challenge. And we've also got the peer challenge coming along in January, and that will be really helpful too. Councillor Sims.
I just wanted to say that the voting, I don't wish to give any spoilers away, I'll leave the excitement until the 23rd of November, but I would say that the waste and the boating scrutiny things have been really, really enlightening and useful, and I think it's going to be a very, very useful committee. Just suddenly you realise that the obvious isn't obvious at all in some of these things. It's been quite useful, and I do hope everybody, even if you're not on the committee, sits over there and applauds on the 23rd.
Thank you very much. Are we happy to know? Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Just to reiterate, yes, I think it's been very useful work. And just to clarify, I think 1.8, I think it's more helpful to describe them as workshops than informal meetings, to be quite honest. Just to clarify.
Yes, I think that might be useful. Thank you. Are we happy to note the activity of the Scrutiny Committee to date?
Propose a recommendation.
And seconded by Councillor Legg. Can we have a vote, please? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you for your contributions. That brings us to the end of the meeting, and it is 11:37. Thank you.